Hi, my name is Alan Bunteman, and along with Christina Reyff, we conducted our analysis on Apple Incorporated. Apple was founded in 1977 by Ronald Wayne, Steve Wozniak, and Steve Jobs, and quickly became a Fortune 500 company. It entered the PC market with very cool, portable, all-in-one machines that were very different than the current offerings at that time. It segued into various industries, including the music industry with its iPod and iTunes combination, the mobile phone industry with its iPhone. It then moved from hardware into the ecosystem and software industries with its iOS platform, and finally revolutionized the tablet industry with its iPad, which was an almost replacement for laptops, showing that Apple was not afraid to cannibalize if it meant disruptive innovation. The current situation for Apple, but still the highest valued publicly owned company, there is some rough seas ahead. Steve Cook's now the CEO. He has made the company more philanthropic. However, a lot of funds have been moved from other areas of the business into paying out dividends and initiating very aggressive share buyback programs. Some recent changes in their exec team include promoting John Ives to their chief design officer. And then just recently, here in Q1 2016, the iPhone recorded its first ever year-over-year quarterly revenue decrease. In terms of the general environment, you're going to see that it's a tough environment for this segment, the technology hardware segment. Economically, the U.S. economy is still a key driver, as is China. Most of the growth is coming from China. However, China, it's variable and it's very tough to predict, and this has a heavy impact on this market. Many of its products are based on discretionary spending. In terms of sociocultural, mostly strong in the United States. China's strong as well, but these companies in this segment need to really pay attention to new emerging markets in the sub-Saharan Africa region. As U.S. and China growth slows, that's going to be the next emerging market. This segment relies on brand loyalty, so as does Apple. So you really have to generate loyalty with each new generation. And with each new generation, more things and different things become important to them. This current generation, very concerned about exploitation and the impact on environmental sustainability. Technology-wise, it's a tough environment. You have to be consistently innovative. You really have to be disruptive with your innovation, not just iterative. iPay, Apple Watch, Apple TV, Apple Music are examples of recent Apple-related innovations. And you really can't be afraid to cannibalize. You have to be ready to completely replace a product line with your new innovation. And Steve Jobs once said, innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. And that's really true for the technology hardware segment. For the political and legal aspects of the general environment, obviously there's lots of risky areas in the world. Unfortunately for this segment, a lot of business is done in some of those risky areas. China, and we just recently mentioned Africa, potential growth areas, also high-risk areas politically. Their supply chain, much of it is overseas, and when you offshore manufacturing, that has become a political hotspot for U.S.-based companies like Apple. U.S. taxation on foreign products and imports, and vice versa. Exporting out to foreign countries can add cost and complexity. And then in terms of what's Apple's consumers' tolerance for foreign-made products, what are Samsung's consumers' tolerance for foreign-made products? This is something that this industry needs to keep an eye on. And then from a demographic standpoint, this is actually a really key positive environmental impact. 90% of Americans own a cell phone. 42% own a tablet. Core users include a vast array of ages from 14 to 55, with 75% of teens having access to mobile technology via the internet. They're highly dependent on their cell phones. The newest generations aren't necessarily brand loyal, and everybody's looking for the next big thing. From a physical standpoint, um, industry has a growing inventory of cell phones, PCs, laptops, even tablets now. They're going to have a lot of recyclable materials on their hands, so they're really going to have to stress recycle programs and really increasing the awareness of energy consumption. Making sure that components are energy friendly means you have to pay attention to not just the cost but the disposal costs. And really, this combination is suppressing margins in the technology hardware industry. And it's really about whether it's Apple, Samsung, Lenovo, Hewlett Packard, who's going to become the responsible leader in this industry segment. And finally, from a global perspective on the general environment, you know, all of these companies are global leaders, and the global aspect really impacts all six of the previous general environment factors. The one piece I do want to call out here that Christina and I analyzed was the impact of recent safety and security topics, i.e., the recent terrorist attack in the United States, where the government and Apple have been debating over access to the iPhone. Moving on to our five forces summary, the technology hardware industry really has two strong forces that impact their ability to perform. We're going to go through all five of them here quickly, but from a bargaining power standpoint and from an interfirm rivalry standpoint, those are two strong forces that every company in this segment must deal with. First, bargaining power of buyers. There are low switching costs. If I'm a consumer and I'm buying this product, especially with the way cell phone contracts are put together today, it's not tough to switch phones. Um, Other areas that have caused great bargaining power for buyers are lower costs, the need for these companies to maintain, if not improve, customer service. That impacts the bargaining power of buyers, and then of course innovation. If you're not innovating, buyers are going to move on to the next company that is. In terms of suppliers, this force is weak. Bargaining power of the suppliers. There's so much inter-firm rivalry within the component supplier segment. It's extremely fierce, and that lowers their ability to really impact the technology hardware segment. The current supplier inventory is high, which drives the prices lower, which that can change, but that's the situation it is now. And then in terms of their component parts, the technology hardware industry has done a really great job of making those parts interchangeable, which allows for low switching costs. In terms of new entrants, another weak force, and extremely expensive to enter this game. Not only are there long lead times to build plants and build up expertise, but just high capital expenditure costs, complicated supply chains. The R&D ramp up is extensive. You have to dump a lot of money to figure out what you're doing. You have to go out there and basically purchase the expertise. So you got to identify industry leaders, recruit them, and then retain them. And because the interfirm rivalry within the technology hardware segment is so strong, you're going up against some real big players if you wanted to try to enter this market. And then in terms of threat of substitute products, duplication of individual services like TV, email, music, it is possible. You can substitute for any one of the smartphones or tablets, PCs that are found in this market segment. However, if you want to duplicate multiple services, that's nearly impossible unless you're an actual interfirm rival. Substitute products ends up being a fairly weak force. In terms of interfirm rivalry, which is our last force and it's our second strong force, margins are still strong. So there's still money to be played with, which leads to healthy R&D spend by the segment. This segment is indicative of rapid innovation, sometimes disruptive. The best innovation in this market is disruptive. Those dollars lead to high advertising spend. There's a lot of product and service imitation. It's not that difficult to reverse engineer some of the products, which leads to low product differentiation. and just the fact that there's a sheer number of competitors out there, and these are some big players like Apple and Samsung, that make the rivalry here very fierce. Moving on to the competitor analysis, we look at three key competitors to Apple: Samsung, Hewlett Packard, and Lenovo. And this competitor segment, we looked at three key success factors: growth, operational risk, and innovation. From a growth standpoint, you can see that Apple really kind of leads the way in terms of, especially the last couple years, its ability to turn revenue into gross profit margin. That shows a high efficiency operation. It also shows the ability to maintain costs. Samsung's next up in this area, but you can see they have some decreasing trends that aren't very attractive. In terms of operational risk, once again, Apple leads the way. The sheer number of turns that they do with their inventory, once again, is indicative of operational efficiency. And then finally, something that we're going to talk a lot about, which is innovation. And in this area, Apple has a little bit to learn. You can see they're being outspent by not only Samsung, but even Hewlett Packard. By next year in 2016, if the trends continue, they'll be outspent by Lenovo as well. And this is off of far lower revenues. So this is an area of danger, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Further financial analysis of the competitor set, you can see liquidity-wise, Samsung is the least leveraged, which is a good thing for Samsung. In terms of profitability, as we talked about, Apple's ability to turn revenue into net income, their return on investment is far greater than any of the competitive set, and their asset turnover, oddly enough, is some of the worst in the competitive set. So even though their sales numbers in comparison to their total assets isn't that great, they're so operationally efficient, they're able to move those assets and really turn them into great net income, which once again speaks to their supply chain and operational efficiency. Talk a little bit more about Apple. We talked a little bit about the competitive set and Apple itself in terms of the financials. So let's talk about products and services. Apple is fairly diverse on the hardware side. They of course have their laptops, the MacBook. They've launched iPhone and iPad, and that's kind of their three legs of their stool. They've been trying to get a fourth leg for a number of years now between Apple Watch, Apple TV. They haven't quite been able to nail that down, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. In terms of services, they have iTunes. They've recently launched Apple Music, Apple Pay, and then from a service perspective, the Genius Bar. Resources and capabilities of Apple. Three resources we looked at: human, intellectual, and physical. The Apple employee is really a key resource for Apple. When we talk about innovation, whether it's iterative or disruptive, and service, really comes down to that employee. And speaking of innovations, intellectual resources include over 5,000 patents in Apple's patent portfolio. And then we mentioned operational efficiency a few times, and that is lends itself to its network of suppliers and manufacturers. In terms of capabilities, innovation, it's really necessary in this industry segment, and it's necessary for Apple to create long-term success. In the electronics industry, technology hardware segment, you really can't rely on the same product for more than a couple years before a competitor or a new entrant really shakes up the industry with a disruptive technology. From a design basis, this is really one of Apple's strengths, their ability to integrate style, function, simplicity, so that you get a really great experience when you use their hardware and software into one kind of ecosystem. And then finally, their brand. Apple has strong brand loyalty with current Apple users. Whether that translates into the most recent generation of consumers is yet to be seen. but it is an emotion-based branding strategy where you've seen some of their commercials about filming important moments in people's lives, and so they really try to connect their product and service to emotions. And then finally, the core competency. We'll take those resources and capabilities, and we talked about really creating a strong hardware and software integration, creating stylish products, services, and a purchasing experience. Whether that's online or in their stores, they want the whole package to be very stylish and emotion driven. And then I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we've talked about their supply chain model and the operational efficiency that's brought to the table there. Finally, we talk a lot about Apple, and they're doing really well in their financials compared to their competitors, and they've had a lot of great innovations over the years. So what's the problem? And so in terms of the problem, they do have an internal weakness that's led to some exclusivity. They do have a high selling price. Their iPhone per unit is one of the most expensive in the segment. They target the middle to upper class, and so they end up with a limited distribution market, which is intentional. However, that's only something that's sustainable if they continue to bring new products and services to the market that the consumer finds value in, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. From an external threat perspective, we talked about some of the five forces and the fact that imitation is fairly easy, some of the pressures that are being put on their margins in terms of escalating costs. So, with one of the strong forces being interfirm rivalry, and combined with some rising costs, once again, any lack of innovation that either creates lower costs or creates higher top line sales, this becomes an issue. What do those limitations lead us to? Key problem for Apple is its inability as of late, to develop and introduce products and services of a disruptive nature. Their revenue stream from new products has stagnated over the last 3 years, and you can see that Hewlett Packard and Samsung both outpace Apple in this regard, and in 2016, it looks like Lenovo will overtake them as well. You can see here the R&D budget for Apple has increased over the past 3 years, while some of the other competitors have either decreased or have remained stagnant. Unfortunately, based on the previous data, that hasn't translated into products that the consumers want, which leads us to believe that the disruptive innovation cycle, which is something that Apple was founded on, has become stagnant. What are some of the options that we can do to help Apple? One, continue to focus on the strong brand image, improve customer loyalty, um, high profit margin products, effective innovation process, and really call upon their history of disruptive technology. Our first option that we're recommending is an increase in R&D while maintaining margins at or above the current state. So a deeper look into the R&D spend analysis, and you can see that as a percentage of R&D in terms of revenue driven, Apple continues to diminish and it continues to fall far behind its competitive set. So for every dollar that, say, Hewlett Packard or Lenovo or Samsung are spending on R&D, they're generating more revenue at the top line sales than Apple is. This is a very disconcerting piece of information and trend. What we're going to do, we're going to take a hard look at the capital return program at Apple, dividends and share buyback programs, and funnel that money into their R&D team. This will help. This will help fund the R&D group, and we're going to kind of create, compensation packages, at-risk compensation packages around rewarding innovation after the proof of concept phase. Our second option is to relaunch and grow Apple TV. We talked about looking for that fourth leg of the stool to support MacBook, iPhone and iPad, and we believe Apple TV is potentially that fourth leg of the stool. We would, of course, use a standard SWOT, five forces analysis, really dive deep with current Apple customers on what they're looking for, both those who have and don't have Apple TV, and really look for kind of a product relaunch to really kickstart Apple TV. We believe that Apple has the ability to disrupt this market like it has smartphones and tablets and even PCs in the past. Our final solution, which is our recommended option, is to go back to their roots and become world leaders in innovation again. Apple was founded with a vision to be a world leader in innovation. They've gotten not necessarily far away from that, but they've definitely drifted from disruptive to iterative innovation. And so we're really looking to create a no limits concept for their research and development group, focusing on what we call a 2057 technology. So like 40-year plan. Don't even think outside the box. There is no box. We want employees in Apple to really go way beyond, just like they used to, and kind of create products that people don't even know that they need yet. How are we going to implement this plan? Well, first off, you need a leader, you need a champion. We're going to be looking to create a chief innovation officer. They're going to be kind of the visionary for the team. They're going to help create innovation goals, and of course, you always want to monitor performance. As we said, we're kind of calling this our 2057 vision. Way out in the future, way outside of the box, and we want to kind of see what the industry and Apple looks like 40 years from now. This will involve a lot of in-depth strategic planning, standard SWOT, five forces kind of analyses. We're going to be looking in other markets outside of technology hardware for truly visionary folks to bring in to kind of help jumpstart and motivate the Apple team. And then, of course, evaluate the current vision and mission statements to see if they need to be addressed, to be modified to help support this 2057 vision. Special no limits concept research and development group. This may or may not be outside of the current kind of short-term R&D group, which is why funding is going to be so important. This group is going to be solely focused on developing and experimenting with way out there 40 years from now technology. We're going to be going after great talent. We're going to retain that great talent. This is going to be kind of secretive. You're going to want to be on this 2057 team if you're an R&D person in the technology hardware segment. Obviously, we're going to continue to encourage patenting, and we're going to make this group highly competitive. So we're going to integrate this 2057 vision throughout Apple. So we're going to make sure that this is aligned with the corporation, with every layer within the organization. We're going to make it extremely visible. We're going to reward it through compensation, and we're going to make sure that behaviors and innovations that support the 2057 vision are applauded and visible to the organization through signage, weekly meetings, quarterly updates, things of that nature. And then we mentioned the compensation piece. It's important. Technology hardware segment pays well. We said we're going to go after great scientists and great R&D technology experts. We need to make sure that their compensation program is aligned with that, and it's going to be about not just base salary and bonus, but it's going to be about some at-risk compensation programs where you get great payouts if you perform and not so great payouts if you don't. At the end of our analysis, we're really looking to take Apple back to its roots as a worldwide innovation leader. It's going to strengthen their brand, improve customer loyalty, both of which should drive better profit margins. They have great employees. We've talked about that. By following our implementation plan, those great employees are going to create disruptive and cannibalizing innovations. And that's going to really create that fourth and even fifth leg of the stool to keep Apple a worldwide leader in the technology hardware segment. Thank you.